So good afternoon folks, and welcome to Reloved Guitars workshop. And today it's a blustery Saturday afternoon in the fall, or the autumn as we call it here in the UK. Excuse me 1 second, just unclipping something. Yeah, so it's the weather's changed and we've gone from being beautifully sunny to, well, it didn't go overnight, but it's changed now from our summer to our autumn, which is heralded by still some nice sunshine, but the leaves all come off the trees, so it's kind of like a snow of leaves falling. Here in the workshop with me today I have His Royal Highness the President of the People's Republic of Reloved Guitars, His Holiness Morris. You see how he reacts to his name. He's very alert and sensitive. So Morris is in here kind of lending a bit of moral support to kind of show me what to do as we go through. Also on the bench I've got a kind of nice vintage old thing that's just been sitting around for a while. It's a Yamaha SE350H twin humbucker thing with a great big old styly Floyd Rose type of thing. I don't know if it's called a Floyd Rose, but it's a big 2-point tremolo, floating tremolo system, which is good and old-fashioned, and it actually works. I've played one of these before, very similar. Actually, it was an HSH, I think, the previous one, and it was my sister's. But on the basis of that, I've looked out for this one for a best part of a year nearly, and found this at a very cheap price because it is battered, or not battered, but it's seen better days in terms of its age and surface condition. But it's a nice old thing. So I've got this out today because I'm going to do a couple of quicker videos than I normally do, and I needed a guitar to demonstrate on, and slightly strangely it's not the ideal guitar to demonstrate, but I'll try and make up for that by making reference to some more bog standard kind of guitars. The reason this isn't bog standard is because it's got a locking nut here. It does have a kind of 0 fret here, a plastic one, which is quite good. It's actually a plastic nut, but a lot of these guitars, like the Ibanez, you might find with a locking nut arrangement, the locking nut unit here is the launch point for the strings, and it has to be precisely set at by the manufacturer. Otherwise, you've got you get stuck with a crap action over the first fret. In this one, you can work on this nut if you need to change it. In this case, right as it happens, I don't need to, but we'll pretend it hasn't got the locking nut. We'll show there's a plastic nut there. Obviously what's different too is this adds a whole depth of kerfuffle to setting it up. So some of the things I'll probably talk about really apply much more to the simpler guitars than this. The reason I got this here is because it's the only one that I have around at the moment that needs a fret leveling, which is the other thing I'm going to talk about. So two things I want to cover. One is the fret leveling game and some of the options in that, and the second one is general sort of thing about how I set the playing action on a guitar. And I've been asked to do these by a couple of Facebook friends or YouTube friends, and one of the things I mentioned in replying to one of them is that I'm slightly nervous about doing this because when you put something out, often when you put a perspective or a review out on Facebook, it can become the target for everybody who knows better instantly, to tell you in the rudest and most unconstructive of terms how much better they know than you. So I would just want to say straight off, this is just the way I do it. It's not the truth or the only way. I have got 100% very good feedback from buyers of my guitars on eBay. I have constant flow of people coming via YouTube videos and asking me to set up guitars for them, and very happy customers having set their guitars up who say very good things about what I've done. So please, before you criticise, it does work in my world. I have got lots of happy customers, so it doesn't really serve any point to tell me I'm going wrong or it doesn't work according to what you understand. So it'll be a much happier world if we just don't get into that. So that's my caveat before I start. If you disagree, that's fine. go and do differently on your guitars, and that's great. We'll have a different way of doing it. Okay. So, where do I start? Oh yes, fret leveling. Right. So this. I talk about this in all the other videos I do, but this is going to be one where I hopefully do it in about 20 minutes, if not sooner. But I'm doing it kind of. I'll do some fret leveling, but I think I'll talk more about the general stuff than I usually do. So what do we mean first of all by fret leveling? I guess one of the things I can do is to use my funky whiteboard thing to show what I mean. It's probably easier than just talking about it. So let me just get a couple of pens out. What I'm able to do, if Morris lets me, is I can turn you around and point you sort of at the thing. I want to try and put you back as far as I can without unplugging you, which isn't actually very far. I'm missing something to stand this on. It's not going to be there, is it? Sorry. Well, look, I'm just going to put you there. I hope you probably can see it's almost in focus. Anyway, so fret leveling, what the hell do we mean? Okay, so my experience, and I've checked a lot of guitars, set up about 180, 200 guitars in the last year or so. Guitars have frets on them, and they're put in a particular way. They're either pressed in with a press, or they're hammered in, or whatever technique people use. It might even be put in by a machine in some factories. I don't know, I haven't been there. But what's true in my experience is that all frets, when you zoom up and look at them kind of magnified, you'll find that, let's say this is 3 frets, you'll find that there are variations in height between them. And actually, if we're going to be really, really precise about this, which we might as well be, you might find that the height differences, this is really exaggerated, okay? Maybe because this middle one's hammered in perfectly well, top one's sticking out a bit, and the one at the end here has got a load of grease and crap that's built up under it. And so the result is, for one reason or another, you get, and if they're glued in, let's say they're glued in, so I'll glue them in, look, so they're glued in place, whatever, and they're stuck, and that's permanent. But what you've got is a set of frets with different levels. You can see there's a gap there, this one's too tall, and that one's perfect, alright, or whatever. But they're all different relative to each other, so that's the zoomed in thing. If I go back quickly, why does it matter? Well, a lot of the time it doesn't. You just get your guitar, you pull it out of the box, you tweak the action, and then you get playing and you don't notice the fret underneath. So how do you play? Well, at one end you've got a nut like that, and the other end, let's say, way down here. Let's shorten this all off. Let's make this my neck. Let's make this the body, and then down here somewhere, let's say there, we've got a bridge. And what happens is, that's a bit too high obviously, so what you have is you have your strings that go over the top of the frets. Let's redraw those just slightly so they make a bit more sense. You have a fretboard with some frets like that, and all the way down to where it stops at the end of the neck. Obviously there are more frets than that, but you can see that there are there's your headstock. You can see the nut end connects to the bridge end, and then over the top of these there is a certain amount of clearance, and it tends to be, the way it works is the clearance, if we looked at it like this, the clearance gets bigger at this end than it does at this end, which means that there's always a kind of an angle set in the neck so that this gap does get bigger. Why is that? It's so that when you press that down onto the top of there and it comes back up towards the nut, there is a little gap between that next one and the string. You don't want to fret that string and get that to play instead. If there's no gap, that's what will happen. If this one along here is bizarrely high, you'll play that one and it'll play that one. And that's what people mean by, sometimes they call it choking notes, or it means you can play 3 notes in a row sometimes on a guitar and they'll play the same note, and what they're doing is they're playing the highest note, which happens to be the highest fret in the sequence. that's because they're uneven. So what you want to be able to do is you want a set of frets that, well, sorry, go back a step. Why does it matter? It doesn't matter providing your action is set high enough. If your action is set high enough, okay, really big, hard to play, you'll have a lot of trouble, or it'll be very difficult to stretch the strings down to hit that fret, but you can do it. Because the bridge is so high, then you automatically get a big clearance and a bigger clearance here and a bigger clearance here and so on. And that's what happens. Most guitars you buy are set with the action down here high enough to negate or disappear any uneven fret problems down here, so you don't notice them. It's only when you try and lower the action, and you'll all have experienced it with your Les Paul copies or your Strat copies or whatever, you start lowering the action down here, and first thing that will happen is you'll get buzzing of certain notes. They just won't ring properly. They'll sound like, let's see if I can find one. Can't bloody find one. Whatever, they'll buzz, okay? Or they'll choke altogether, in which case you back off and you raise this back up, and that's usually, and you stop at the first point you can get to with your action setting, typically that allows you to have buzz-free play, and then you leave it at that and you carry on, and that's your guitar. Now that's how most guitars tend to be going around the world. Most second-hand guitars you'll get will already be, electric guitars particularly, will already be set at some sort of playing action which tends to have just raised it above the buzzing and choking problems, and people will have gone as low as they can go and just backed off a little bit, and that'll be it. On most guitars it's playable, it's not bad. Some are worse than others. You'll find the ones that you remember from childhood that you started out with that were really high will be because those frets are really bad under there, and so that the action has to be really high. So why are we talking about levelling them at all? Well, people say, they come to you and they say, I want you to set up my guitar. And what is a setup? Well, you can either, what often happens is, when you get a setup, let's say there's the guitar again, with a nut bridge, neck and so on, what often happens is people lower this a bit. Sometimes sometimes luthiers will do something with that. They might cut the slots a bit deeper on there. They might polish the frets in setup. They might add a little bit of curvature to the neck, which the guitar needs, and then that'll be your lot. That's your setup. Or they might do the intonation down here on the individual saddles, because that's quite easy to do. Doesn't depend on the fret condition or height particularly. So a typical setup will try and make the best out of those things. Often clean the frets up a bit, do whatever you can to the action to make it as good as you can, plus a bit of intonation, and that's a typical setup. My personal view, and it's only a personal view, is that this is pointless unless you take care of the frets first. It's not pointless. You can do a setup, but most people I've ever found want a low, clean, meaning ringing, nice ringing notes, low, clean, fast action. Most people, not everybody, but most people. And to get one of those out of most budget guitars, you need to level the frets first. If you level the frets, what you do is you create a level playing field here. That means you can lower the intonation, lower the action much more at both ends, nut and bridge, and that allows you to get a faster, cleaner playing action out of the whole thing. So that's the answer to why. You don't have to. Many guitars people play happily all their lives without doing it, but many people say to me, why do you bother doing it? Because I like to do it. So what does that mean? Leveling the frets. What does it normally mean? Or how do you normally do it? There are lots of different ways. Let me just put this out of the way for a minute. So a normal way, or a typical way of leveling the frets, let's use one that's never going to get reused probably. This one is quite twisted, so I wouldn't want to use this again. So I'm just going to use it as a demonstration. So how do you level the frets? Well, as I said, a number of ways you can do it. here's what you do if you want to level frets. On a bolt neck, you can take it off, and to make these relatively level to each other, you might want to level or flatten the neck. So typically, if I was going to do it this way, I would take the truss rod and adjust it until in my hand here the neck is nice and flat. And you can use a rule or something. Let's say you have a nice rule, and you can go, okay, is this flat? No, it's a bit curved. I better twist the truss rod a bit more. You can use one of those with cutouts for the frets, so you're only resting on the wood itself. That's a bit more accurate. Anyway, the idea would be that you level the neck, you flatten the neck, and it's passive, right? You're just using the truss rod to flatten it out. It's off the guitar. Once you've done that, then you can use a fret leveling file like this, which is pretty rough. I mean, I use this for doing my fingernails. I use this for what did I just do? I sharpened an axe with this the other day. But you can use a file, and it's custom made by Crimson Guitars. It's a good file. It's very, very hungry, so you could just go down this guitar neck in strips, and guess what? By the time you've done that, the fact that this is very, very flat you don't have to be too harsh with it, but once you've taken a bit off all of these frets, you can guarantee they will all be level, because this is dead flat, and that forces a kind of relative levelness. So that's a really simple way of leveling your frets. The problem you've got with that is that once you've done that, you've got a flattened fret with rough scratches on top, and you're going to need to reshape that and then re-smooth it to make it back into a playable surface for your guitar. That takes a process of filing each fret individually to curve off the flattened bit. So again, using the whiteboard, here's your high fret, for example. Your fret leveling thing goes swing, takes a chunk off the top, and you get left with a nice flat thing with loads of sort of scratching on the top, which is really rough. So what do you need to do? You need to get a special file, or you can do it with a hand file, but you need to get a file that allows you to reshape that fret within that metal that's left to you. You want to keep that height, but you want to lose this kind of excess so that you can reshape it back into this nice smooth thing. And then once you've done that, you want to then polish each of those frets to a nice shine for playing on, but at all times without losing any more of the height. And that's the thing, because once you've flattened them all off relative to each other, what you've got is a bunch of frets that are more or less level. Well, they're definitely level, completely level. And all you're doing is you're just reprofiling the ones that need reshaping. This one didn't get hardly touched, so you just need to polish that one. This one needs reprofiling too, just to create that nice rounded shape, but without losing any height. So that's your fret leveling, your sort of typical fret leveling and reprofiling and polishing process. So you might level with a file like that. You might reprofile with a concave diamond file specially made for the purpose, like this. About 70 quid from StewMac, or 60 quid. A good investment though if you do lots of it. You can do it by hand, it's just a matter of same old thing. And then you would finish off with a series of sandpaper grades followed up by micro mesh, which goes to really fine grades which basically polish the metal. And you need to be protecting the fingerboard, so I use masking tape throughout that process. So that's a fret leveling. When you put the guitar back on, again let's use the whiteboard, sorry. When you put the neck back on, let's say you leveled them all out, okay, so you've got this lovely perfect level set of frets relative to each other, and you can test that by using a fret rocker which sits across 3 frets, metal straight edge, and if the frets are the same height, you don't get any rocking at all. If they're a different height, even minutely, you hear a little clicking as it pivots over the higher of the 3 frets, alright? But you've already got rid of that with your fret leveling, so there's none of that left. So once you put the neck back on the guitar, bolt it up, right, and then you restring it. And once you tune it up, what tends to happen, this is extremely exaggerated of course, tends to happen is the neck quite naturally bends under the load of the strings, and it needs to bend, not that much, but it needs a little bit of bend, because when you twang a string, right, it vibrates, if you like, and if you imagine it spinning like a skipping rope rather than it doesn't just go up and down in a straight line, but you imagine it's describing a kind of circle which gets wider at the middle and narrower at the ends, and that circle there is, obviously, is bigger at the middle. It's exaggerated, right? But it means that in the middle part of your neck, there's your headstock and there's your body, in the middle part of your neck you need some curvature to allow those strings, particularly the bass strings, to allow them to spin freely. If you try and play on a flat neck, completely flat neck, what happens is the space those strings need to rotate or spin is hitting the deck, and you'll get buzzing and slapping all the way through. So relief is important. Okay. People say how much. This is where I've said to a couple of people already, and you may have seen from videos that I do. I don't measure it particularly. I do it by eye. You can go and research online if you want, and you can get the manufacturer's recommended amounts and so on and so on. I'm guilty of doing it by feel and by eye, and in principle, I will experiment a little bit. In practice, I'll experiment a little bit, and I'll see what works and what doesn't. And I'll stop where it feels right. So your action on your guitar is a combination of the relief, because your strings will go down there and they'll be a bit higher down here if your relief is more. It's a combination of your relief, your nut slot depths, which dictate the height over the first fret here and other frets, and down here on the bridge action. Okay. The height of your bridge saddles. So it's kind of these three things together that give you I've put all these things together in one talk now, so anyway, what the hell. So these three things, but actually there is a fourth thing which dictates your action. And if for example you think like me that action equals kind of overall the feel of your guitar, how does it feel when you're playing it? Well, of course it's down to the height of the strings over the first fret. If that's too high, believe it or not, well, you've experienced it. If it's too high, it's hell to press the strings down to form chords like F's and B's that beginners struggle to do. If it's too high, it also causes these strings here, the strings fretted in this area, to go sharp compared to the open strings, and that can give you all kinds of intonation problems, make your chords sound awful, make the guitar sound like you can't get it in tune, and you actually want to throw it away, which is how I learned all this stuff in the first place. And then of course the action at the bridge end, not in Wales, but the bridge end action sets the height down here. So if it's really hard to play chords down this end because it's so high off the 12th fret and beyond, then that's to do with the bridge action. And the relief is obviously adds to that action because there's a slight amount of curvature. But I think there's a fourth aspect, which is and I'm going to draw it in here. The fourth aspect is fret condition, and by that there's all kinds of things you could say. The sharpness of it, if it's sharp, if the frets are sharp and ragged, it's horrible to play. But most importantly, the amount of wear on them. Okay, so I'll just scrub all of this out and just show you one thing quickly. So for example, on an old guitar, your frets, a new guitar, a fret will kind of look like this. This little tang sunk into the wood, and you know, it'll be between two frets like that, nice and new, all shiny. And when you press your finger onto a wooden fret, or towards the fingerboard, if you like, there's your finger pressing down with your fingernail. When you press that down to fret here to make this note, when the frets are new, you've got two things happen. First of all, you feel mostly the string under your finger. and it feels nice and positive. It also means that when the frets are new and there's a big gap here, you can also get your fingers kind of underneath it and push it sideways. And so for bending strings, there's loads of room between the string where it sits on top of the fret and the fingerboard, so you can get under and press. So to bend notes, you need good condition frets. When the frets are worn out, which they often are, they'll tend to look like this. They've been either readdressed and flattened off so many times that they just end up way down low. The strings kind of sit over the top of them like that, and then first of all your intonation point, which should be there dead center, has kind of moved to the front of the string in these cases, because it's flat mostly, right? So as soon as it's flat, that's one of the reasons, by the way, you have to round them off once you've leveled them. So an old guitar where the strings have literally either worn, sorry, the frets have either worn flat like this, or have been filed flat so many times to kind of dress them in one way or another, you'll spot them straight away because they look this shape, and the intonation point moves from its correct central place to the front edge. They're usually hard, they're scratchy to play often because they're rough, but most of all, when you fret them, what you feel with your fingers is you actually feel mostly wood. No rude inferences there. And you can't get your fingers underneath the string because it's so low to the wood. None of your finger can get underneath to push it, so it's not good for bending. So once you're in that territory, you have to refret the guitar. There's nothing you can do. In fact, when you get a guitar in this condition, if you kind of look at it and give it the beady eye, you'll see straight away that there's no leveling you can do. You haven't got enough fret metal, and all that's going to happen, if it feels like that to begin with, you can't dress the frets or recondition them, because you'll be even lower by the time you've finished. So there really is only one option for a guitar that's been played that much or is that old. It's a refret, which basically turns it back into that and gives it a completely new lease of life. Just so happens it's one of my favourite pastimes. I love doing that, just bringing all these guitars back to life. But it's not cheap, so really reserved for guitars that have sentimental value or great personal financial value or whatever. But for a 50 quid Gear for Music Stratocaster, for example, you wouldn't really want to spend 150 quid to have it refretted. You might as well spend 150 quid getting a reasonably new, Squire vintage modified or something like that, which already starts off with the frets pretty much in that condition. So just economy doesn't make sense sometimes it does. I tend to refret a lot of mine because I can, and because some of them are guitars that I really value, like old Japanese made Squires and things like that. Right, so hopefully for Crafty Pumpkin and any others who are watching, hopefully that's given you some idea of what I'm talking about in terms of the action. Let's get the thing up again. Let's pull this one up just for conventional guitar-ness. So this has got no strings on at the moment because I'm waiting for some new circuitry to go behind there. But so the issue here is the action is a composite of four things now. It's the setting of the nut and how high the nut sits and how deep the slots are in the nut, which dictate ultimately the height of the strings over the first fret. That's the measurement bit that we check. It's also dictated by the height of the string saddles down here. It's dictated by the amount of relief or curvature in the neck when the strings are on, and it's also dictated by the condition of the frets and whether there's any kind of height in them so your fingers can get underneath. So those four things combine to sort of dictate the feel of your guitar or the action of your guitar. So I've also then explained why you'd level them, because it will allow you to have much greater freedom over how low the action goes. And as I said, the experience shows me that almost nobody I've ever come across didn't want their guitar action setting a little lower, providing it would come up with a clean sounding individual notes all playing beautifully well. So fret leveling allows you to do that, gives you that freedom, and it's done by using a tool to level them all. Now that's there is a couple of questions about measurement in here. Somebody asked me, I think it was Crafty Pumpkin again, asked me from perspective of their guitar, how would they know what the action to take over what the string action over the first fret should be? And the answer, I suppose, is that it will vary. Depends. Well, you could say it will vary. In my experience, it doesn't vary that much. Now, people will disagree with this, but let me say why. I tend to aim on an electric guitar like this for an action, a playing action, and I measure it at the 22nd fret or 21st fret. But I aim for something around about 1.5 millimeters at the 21st fret. Now, folks, it doesn't matter whether it's 1.45 millimeters or 1.56 or 1.61. It's close to 1.5 millimeters, right? As near as feels any different, it's about 1.5 millimeters. Because I always aim for that kind of playing action, it means that I know when I start the whole game, I set this to give me that action over there. At this end, for a guitar with a 1.5 millimeter playing action over here, I want a little bit of fret relief, so I dial that in with the strings on and I check. And a way of checking is to hold down on the first fret, hold the string down there, and on the last fret, or just after the last fret, sorry, and you should have a gap in the middle. Okay, i.e. the string should then press down. You can put a capo on the first one, hold that last one with your finger, and then press down in the middle. And you'll see if there's no gap at all, you need some relief. If there's a millimeter gap, it's too big. If there's about 0.3 of a gap, it's around about the right amount. But every manufacturer will tell you slightly different value. If you want to go and set up your Fender according to Fender specs, they might tell you such things as 0.5 millimeter over this fret here. They might tell you, I don't know, 0.7 of a gap over this fret here because of relief, and they might tell you ideally set 2.5 at this end. Well, that may be what they tell you, but I set the guitars up so that they play as low and as easily as they can. And my experience of that, and please go and chase your own settings if you want a different feel, but my experience of providing that service is that I go for 1.5 playing action on the last fret. I go for less than half a millimeter of relief in the middle, and I go for 0.3, between 0.2 and 0.3 of a millimeter under each string, or over the first fret under each string. So because I do pretty much the same each time, and because no electric guitar I've ever come across has any different structure that demands that these measurements are different, other than if you were setting up a slide guitar for someone, in which case you need the action much higher, and you can buy nut converters and all that for doing that. To be honest, I've not found any reason why these things need altering. But that's just my personal take on it, and the people who buy the guitars that I set up know that's what they're getting. It's very clear in the listings, it's very clear when I take on a customer job. I say, what would you like? And they say as low as possible, and I go, well, I am for 1.5 typically, and if they come around personally, I get them a guitar that's set at 1.5 millimeters, and they go, yeah, love it, can you do that for mine? And I do that for them, and they're happy with that, and that's cool. But it's not the only settings you can use, all right? So please, no flaming. Crafty Pumpkin, I hope that helps. Okay, the three things. Go for, I mean, if you don't know, if you set the cut the slots on here so that each string is 0.3 of a millimeter above the fret, once you've done the fret leveling and everything else, then you'll have an easy to play guitar. If it's 0.4, it'll still be easy to play. If it's 0.5, it's getting a bit harder. 0.6, 0.7, you start to find most players will start to be pressing so hard to make it touch that they're getting distortions, or intonation distortion if you like. The notes are going sharp. So the just general rule of thumb is above 0.5 of a millimeter over the first fret, you start to risk those it being hard to play and intonation problems. Below 0.5 to down to 0.2, is a good region. If you go below 0.2, you're risking running out of room. But remember, or if you don't trust me, take a guitar that you like that plays well, stick a capo on the first fret, and then measure the height of the strings above the new first fret, which is obviously, if you do it on the first fret, that's now the first fret. Measure that gap with a capo on, and you'll see it's probably something around about 1/10 of a millimetre, 0.1. So even going down to 0.3 is conservative, and I find it improves the playability at this end. And like I say, loads of people seem to agree. You might not, that's fine. Okay, all these caveats and trying not to upset anybody, but there we are. So, what do we have in hand? Well, we have, combining this talk about how I set up things or do action with this other question is, what the hell is this weird tool you've been using? So a lot of people have noticed that I no longer use this to level frets, or this, see that sandpaper on there, self-adhesive sandpaper. It's a milled or machined flat edge, because it's one of those, conveniently it's one of those you know, spirit levels, which has a pretty flat edge. If you check it against any really flat edge, it's quite accurate. And it's actually quite good for leveling all your flat frets. Some people swear by it. They say you can only get totally level frets if you do them on a tool that's big enough to cover all of them instantly. Disagree with that. This covers 4 or 5 at a time, even at the fattest end. That's more than enough to ensure relative flatness between all of them. But some people will argue forever that this is the only way to do it. However, somebody showed me a way of doing it which I think is better, and now I do all the time. I used to take the neck off, flatten the neck, do the fret leveling with the neck as flat as I can make it, and then I would know that the frets were relatively level on a neck that was itself flattened. When you put them back on and curved them slightly, that level, that relative level, would still be accurate because it's curved so slightly that the relative level between the frets next door to each other was still preserved more or less. And it worked. So my first 50 or 60, 70 setups, or probably 100 setups, were done that way, and every person who got their guitar appreciated the improvement in the way it played and the reduction of the action that they could now get. So it works, okay? If you can only do it this way or this way, fantastic, do it. It'll improve your guitar immensely. However, somebody then brought over a tool that they bought, and I had a go at it, and it was a tool for leveling the frets with the guitar with the strings on. And you go, well, why would I do that? Well, how would I do it? So any common sense brain would say, let's say that's the curved neck, right? And we're going to put the strings on, curve the neck, because we do it with the relief in the neck, so it's got a little bit of curve, and then you put a flat. It's impossible, and I just thought it was a ridiculous proposition. How on earth can you level frets? You just basically wear all the end ones down until you touch the middle ones. But that isn't how it worked, and this tool was great, and it demonstrated that you can get a tool, then instead of this being flat, you tune this to the same curve as whatever you've dialed into your neck as relief. So then, if I draw it quickly, what you're doing is, instead of before, when there was the frets leveled, and then we took a leveling tool, whatever that thing was, and we go backwards and forwards, and we leveled flat tool on a flat neck, all right, with our frets. Brilliant. Now we've got a curved neck. I know it's exaggerated, all right? Curved neck with all the frets sitting there, and then what we're doing is we're bending our tool to match the curved neck. Now you can see that if I use that tool in that exact matching curve, I will still achieve the same thing. It would just be like two things working together, right? Following the same shape. So how do you bend a tool? Well, this is what the inventor of this other tool showed me how to do. That tool showed me how to do, is you can deform a flat surface. You see this? This is a flat surface with some sandpaper stuck to it. It's very narrow as well, which is quite convenient. But you can, if that happened to be a truss rod, which it happens to be, pulled out of a broken squire, you can turn, I don't know if you'll be able to see this, right? This is pretty much flat, although it's bent a little by gravity at the moment. If I twist this hard, can you see the amount of bend that's gone into that? So now I've created a curve which could fit inside another curve, and that's all this is doing. And the question is, how the hell do you match it? And here's how I do it. Again, all courtesy of this inventor whose tool showed me how to do this. If you want to buy the inventor's tool, it's called the Katana, and it's about $145, and I'll say right now, it's a great tool, and it's slightly easier than this version that I'm using now. But I have to say, and I'll try not to go into too much detail, due to circumstances outside of my control, I'm obliged to use this one. I bought the other one, and the inventor fell out with me about the things I said or didn't say about it, even though I praised it hugely, and I thought I was being very complimentary and supportive, and I was busy recommending it left, right and centre to everyone I met, but it for some reason, which I still don't quite understand, he was very unhappy with that, and it became very unpleasant, so I quickly found myself not using it, and partly out of respect. I could have still carried on using it, but I'm not, so I had to use an alternative because I still need to do this job. And as it happens, I had one of these lying around, and it occurred to me that to give it a try. And actually what I found was, apart from being less convenient than the bought tool, this essentially gets the job done. And it gets it done more effectively than that does. Now, why does it make a difference? And the answer is this: when the neck is loaded with all the string loading, which this is, it not only is curved, okay, but it's also compressed. And that makes these frets sit microscopically in different places than when they are just passively flat and we're doing the fret leveling that way. So this way not only achieves the fret leveling, but it also does it with a fraction more precision than to do it the other way. And just take my word for it, because I've experimented and now I only do it this way. Would have loved to have done it with the manufacturer's, the guy's tool. It's not possible, so I have to do it with my own, and hence here I'm showing you what I'm doing. But if you've got money, go and buy his, because it's a bit easier. But this is essentially free, and it will do the same. Now, how do you use it? Right, sandpaper on your truss rod. It has to be a truss rod with a what do you call it? A round bar on top and a flat one. That just happened to be the way the square ones are. How do you deform it to meet the shape of the neck? Because you can't really measure it. You can eyeball it, but you can't really see it. So what I do, and this is again courtesy or thanks to the inventor of that other tool, showed this, and you learn this when you buy that tool. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put these three little feet onto the neck, kind of equally spaced. Let me just rule of thumb and double check that they're nearly equally spaced. What can I move? I can move that. So I just want them, yeah, there you go, roughly half and half. And what I do is I'm slacken this all the way off, and I'm going to place this on top, and I'm going to start by placing it down on the left one here, my left, and I'm going to bring it down and just see where it falls. And it's showing me at the moment that this is actually touching the middle one before it touches the end one. Now there's no curve in this, which that suggests to me straight away that this device here hasn't got any relief in the neck at all. And if I just whiz down here, that is exactly what I'm finding. So the first thing I want to do on this guitar, I've forgotten how it works on this guitar. The first thing I want to do is to, if I can I do it easily? I'm going to hoik out this little plug here and try and get myself a turn on the truss rod. Not actually sure how this comes out. I've forgotten, it's been so long since I did anything to it. Help! Just want to pull it out. Possibly. If I look like I'm being a bit rough with these strings at the moment it's okay because they're destined to come out anyway. This isn't so easy as I would have thought. I want to get these things out. Damn, that's I've overlooked this. Gone ahead too far. Let's see if I can winkle that out one way or another. What I don't want to have to do is slack all the strings off because they're a pain, because they're a Floyd Rose. Come along, you. Tell you what, let's see if I can. Sorry about this slight detour. I should put a stop on it to save you being bored to tears with my preambling. In fact, that's what I'm going to do. Let me just find a screwdriver. I think I'll stop for a minute and come back when I've just freed up this this here truss rod. Okay, so we'll stop for a sec. Okay, having just slacked off the truss rod a little bit, give it a tiny bit of relief. There's not a lot available to this neck. It's so old a guitar. I don't think it. I don't know if the neck's just really stiff, but it's not bending much in response to the strings. Although the truss rod is fully slacked off. However, I can see using this truss rod. I don't think you'll be able to see, but now it's touching the first and the last one and missing the middle one, which tells me there's a tiny bit of relief, which is what I'm looking for. So I'm just going to turn this until it starts pulling. Can you see how it's pulling the middle one now? An equal amount as the end one. So that means that's now microscopically tuned to replicate the curve, the minute curve in the neck. Now, before I go any further, I'm going to get the next thing I need, which is a marker pen. Now, these are throwawayable strings. These are put on to set this guitar up. I've got some more work to do on it still, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark off, before I start doing any leveling, I'm going to mark off all these frets with marker pen, and it'll take a little while to do this. Sorry to be boring, but the reason for this, and it doesn't matter by the way if it goes on the strings because I'll throw them when I've finished doing the setup, but this is, the marker pen is a great way to know where the tool has or hasn't cut into the frets. Now, one of the things about doing this is that the frets down this end, because they're old, they also have some wear, some grooves in them, and the fret leveling process is a really good way not only of leveling the frets but of removing the grooves from old age, if you like. I can also see as I'm doing this that a number of these frets are having played flat, so they're about 1 millimetre wide, which is more than they need to be. They need to be rounded ideally, and that's what we're going to aim to do with this process. Just trying to make sure I don't rub off too much of this black as I'm putting it on, and draw a bit on the fretboard. If you were thinking ahead of yourself, you might do this process having already put the masking tape onto the fretboard, but I've still got time. Once I've done the leveling, then I'll take the strings off and then I'll mask off the fretboard. So much for my 20-minute video. Anyway, I basically combined 2 videos together. So I'm just painstakingly going through now, marking these all up. But it's worth doing, and you'll see why in a sec. Morris has changed places. So again, you know, you have an option. You can buy tools. Often you can buy tools, or you can use simpler, more time-consuming manual tools. Or sometimes you can make your own. In a way, I'm doing that here because of circumstances. But it's good to know that, you know, it's available to you. You don't have to, if you can't afford it, you don't have to buy the expensive thing. Although if you can, and you do a lot of this, then it's it makes sense to, you know, because you end up saving yourself a lot of time and hassle. Now this process for me is a little bit harder than using the paid for tool, because as I start to use this tool now, I'm going to have to move some strings out of the way. And the benefit of the tool, the bought and sold commercial tool that does this, it allows you to do this job, is that it allows you to do it without having to fiddle around and move the strings out of the way. Technically, anyone who wants to know, the good thing about that is with the paid for commercial tool, your loading on the neck is exactly the same throughout this process. With this version, because I'm moving a string out of the way, I'm changing the tension slightly. I'm putting a bit more tension on one, but I think overall the load stays pretty close to the same, so it's not the end of the world, but I tend to move one string at a time. So what am I aiming to do? I'm aiming to pull strings slightly out of the way to start leveling in strips. So I know I've got the curve right on my tool. I'm going to tie a piece of wire. I'm going to just twist a piece of wire around the string at this end. I'm going to pull the fret this way and probably tie it around this locking nut, for example. So it's putting pressure on the string, which is fine. As I said, we're going to chuck these away at some point, so it's not the end of the world. I'm just kind of wrapping it around wherever it will just hold this string out of the way, which is not that. Normally I wouldn't be doing this with a locking nut, you see, so the whole thing would be a damn sight easier. Let's go around these strings. Yeah, I wouldn't normally have this problem because I could drop this string out of the nut slot. So here I'm going to have to kind of tie it up to the base strings, and I'm going to do the same down this end with a piece of this garden wire. As I said, not ideal, but it'll do for now. Okay, so grab it and then wrap it with this one. Now it still needs to be pulled out of the way. Okay, so basically what I'm doing here, and it is a lot harder on this guitar, by the way, than it would be on a bolt-on neck Stratocaster. I wouldn't be fiddling around at this point. It would just pull the string out of the nut and hoik the bottom end of it, where I am now, off to one side. But you can see I've just pulled the string off to one side. Why am I doing that? Because what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this very gently, keeping the same curvature in it, and I'm going to put it down onto the frets, and I'm going to start very, very lightly moving it up and down on these frets, and I'm looking straight away for where it's going to be doing any cutting. Okay, and within a few stripes or strokes, you'll see fairly soon where it's touching the frets and where it isn't. And what that'll tell you straight away is which frets are high and which frets are low relative to each other, even in this playing configuration. So let's get this green thing. I've got a little green coil of wire on the end of here that helps me to hang it up, and it sometimes just gets in the way annoyingly. So just take a stop there. Straight away I can see that this tool is cutting that one, that one, that one, that one, a bit of that one, 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 and that one. Now the fact that it's cutting in 3 places spread across the whole of the neck tells me it's tuned right, and what it tells me is that the ones that are still black are lower than the ones around it, and that's often the case. You'll have either high frets or low frets. Sometimes they've been hammered in even more than others, and our job would be to just keep going a little bit until we've either, you can do it 2 ways. You can do it visually, so that you keep going until, if you're confident in the tuning curve of your tool, you can keep going until you see all of them are just starting to get touched or silvered by the what do you call it, what's this stuff, sandpaper. Or I prefer it another way I'll show you is to stop and just play all the notes on the neck and see what you get, because the thing about this, doing this method, it's very elegant, it's quite precise, so you don't take away any more fret than you need to. And the reason you know, well, what guides you in that is how the strings play. And so every now and then when you've taken a bit off, just periodically, you know it's a pain with this little thing, but stop, free up the strings. It'll be still reasonably in tune because they're under locked conditions at the moment with this tremolo system, which is quite accurate. So we're back now, string released, and what we do is we just play our way up the neck, and that action, which I can tell you just by looking at this now, is currently sitting, it's not low, it's not ultra low, but it's currently sitting at 2mm. That plays really well. Now if I were to take this down, I can now lower the action a little bit more, and I'll just do it equally on both sides. So I'll go from 2mm, I'll do a full half turn on there and a full half turn on there. Okay, and then that will take the action down to, where are we? Just under 2. I'll go down a bit more. Another half turn. And another half turn here. Let's see what we've got at the end. Okay, we'll have, now this is really low. Okay, now this is just over 1. It's incredibly low for a guitar like this. But if you want to see how accurate this version of fret leveling is, dial in something like 1mm, say that's my ideal playing action. Almost goable. Okay, see if you can spot where the unevenness still remains. But if you thought it was there, you're right. And what it tells us there is this one's lower than either one on either side. And that means if we want to iron out this at this 1mm action, which is very, very low, but if we want this super low playing action, which is possible to get with this precision method, then we keep going a little bit until we've cleaned this note up by lowering everything a little bit to catch up with this flattened fret here. And it's the only problem remaining on that, so we know it's just down to that one. Equally, I could crank this up to, let's say, more like 1.5mm, which is my typical height. So let me just double check this. Okay, so 1.5 will be, I think, a quarter of a turn. Let's get this working. Is there a middle position? Yes. I'll go a quarter of a turn counterclockwise to bring it out, or up. Quarter of a turn there. I'll do a quarter of a turn here. That should give me 1.5. So 1.5. Let's see if now it plays the same. Do you hear that? That almost cancels out that low bit. Still there a little bit, but it's livable with. So you could, it's just a little bit there. All the other notes are great. I'm going to leave it at 1.5 and carry on now, do a little bit more on with the playing action at 1.5, which is where I would personally like it to stay. Playing action at 1.5, and we'll do a little bit more fret leveling just to get us down to clear that last note. Now once we're there, then we don't need to do any more. There's no reason, even if there are some that haven't been touched by the sandpaper, there's no solid reason to carry on filing away. We're only aiming to get a perfect scale of notes, or a perfect fretboard of notes out of this whole trick. And once we've got those, whatever else it looks like, we might as well stop, because there's no need to go any further. And there's no point taking more metal off than you have to, especially on an older guitar like this, where we're halfway through its fret life probably. We don't want to go too much lower than we can help it at all. So I'll go back into the fret leveling process. I know which one I'm aiming to get down to, and I'm just going to trust this 400 grit paper just to bring me down to that level any second without having to press too hard or unnecessary force. All the time I'm thinking to myself, have I got this, is this still mirroring the curve on this neck? And I would recommend that several times as you work your way this way across the guitar or the fingerboard, I recommend that you just double check that, use the little feet. And the feet are brilliant because it's this sort of, I've touched the top of that now, so I bet you that solved the problem. The feet are amazing because it shows you that only 3 points are necessary to map a curve. 2 aren't, obviously, but 3 are. So with those 3 little feet, it's the minimum kind of material we need to let us set this truss rod to mimic the curve. It's a really, really simple way of doing it. And it's all credit to the inventor of the Katana tool for working it out, thinking of it. But it's a really good system. So, having now, I can see that the file has now started to just scuff the top of this one. I know that this will play cleanly all the way up now at 1.5 millimeters. There you go. That's it. That is that strip done. I know now that all I have to do, I'll come this way across the fingerboard, I'll get dirty, I'll come this way across, I'm not going to bore you with all of it, right? All I have to do now is come this way across the fingerboard, do all of these strips till they're all done, testing them as I go so I don't take off any more than I need to. Then I'll stop, ditch these strings, the neck will release and flatten out a little bit, that's not a problem. Then I'll mask off the fingerboard. I will then reshape each of these frets individually, which can be done without strings on. Then I'll sandpaper them all till they're smooth and shiny, which can be done without any strings on. Then I'll load it with new strings, the final strings, playing strings, and I'll bring it back up under pressure on this set of 9s that I'll use on it. And I know that that will pull the neck back in to the configuration that we're achieving now, which means we'll get all of those notes out at this 1.5 millimeter action, which is going to be a really nice light action, which you never would get normally out of a guitar like this without doing this kind of thing. You could even go lower. I've gone below 1 millimeter at this end and it plays, but you've got to be very, very precise and careful to get this level perfectly good. But this is as a watchword, I suppose. If I wanted to get to sub 1 millimeter actions, which is a bit mad really, then I would be really needing to make sure every single fret along this way is touched by the file. As it is, there are a couple of these that aren't, which tells me that I couldn't probably go much beyond 1.5 without running into trouble, in which case I'd have to get even more precise. But I'm holding back from that because there is not as much fret material left on here as there is on a newer guitar or one that I've just refretted, for example. So I hope that's given you a good view on the playing action, certainly the way I deal with it, and also the using this truss rod fret leveling tool, inspired by the Katana tool, which, as I said, is a good tool. It's slightly easier to use than this. But if you don't have money, or if you're into kind of self-sufficiency, then this is a great thing to use because it really does work. I've done, well, all of my recent guitars have been done this way. It isn't 100% perfect. There is a tiny bit of flex in this, hence I haven't done it yet, but was about to experiment with this baby, which is one that I bought from StewMac, and you'll notice that it's wider so it takes a bigger chunk of the fret. It's a bit stiffer all round, so it won't deform as much as that one. So this one potentially could get even more accuracy than the one I'm currently using. My only kind of I don't know what the word is, reservation about it is that it is wider. There's something really good about using a very narrow one. It takes longer, but you get better tracking of the radius of the neck as you come across it from the far side to the side nearest me. The flatter you go, the wider this is, the less respecting of the natural radius of the neck you are, and you kind of start to put, I guess if you think of it visually again, if you have, sorry, there's two necks looking as exaggerated, and that's the radius of the neck. So your fret sits there like that and goes all the way across. Of course, it's not that curved, but exaggerated. And what we're doing with this fret leveling file at the moment, we're taking a strip here first, then we're doing a strip there on the second string, coming backwards and forwards this way, and then we're doing a strip on the third and a strip on, we're connecting them up actually, but they're sort of first strip, second strip, third strip, fourth strip, fifth strip, sixth strip. If we use the wider one, we're kind of going 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6. It's less smooth and it puts more flat, if you like, flattens or sections the curve more crudely. So in a way, it's better that it's thin, and it's in fact it's far better than using that. That would be, you'd be across that radius of the neck in about 2 chunks with that, 3 at the most, which you can see is not smooth at all. You'd be flattening the fret like that as you go across. So I don't like that for fret leveling. In fact, that's the other reason why I don't use that anymore, because it's actually too fat for my liking. So anyway, all of that detail aside, I hope that's been useful. It's obviously a lot longer than I started. I'm going to carry on and set this up. This guitar is going to be a lovely old vintage thing. I did spray some lacquer to smooth. The neck was all crumbly and all the lacquer had broken off. I did spray lacquer on it, but it went cloudy and bloomed in kind of horrible speckly white. So although it's smooth and lovely and shiny, it looks a bit ugly. So I might just strip that a bit and redo it, or I might just live with it, because to be honest, it's full of holes and marks anyway. So it's never going to be about the looks of this thing. It's going to be about its pedigree and old-fashionedness. Anyhow, so thanks for sticking it out this long. I hope that was useful to you. Explanation of this tool. Some people on YouTube have been calling it the Sam stick. It isn't my invention, or the concept is not really my invention. It's just inspired by the Katana tool, which I wasn't able to use. But it's also, you've got one in your house, you can use the same thing. It's just putting something you've got to use in a clever way. But as I said, if you've got the money, do buy the Katana tool, because it's a good tool to use. It does that job even slightly more precisely, although it is a bit wider, which again isn't perfect for me. I like this because it's simple and everybody's got one somewhere, or you can get one for £6 from Guitar Luthier Supply Store, and a bit of sticky tape, sandpapery stuff, which you can search on eBay. You'll find it if you look hard enough. There's stuff, the guy in Portugal, I don't know, rhino tape or something like that. Anyway, you can buy sticky stuff which comes in bits that look like, has it got a name on it? Made in Portugal. It's called Rhino Dry. But there's a Luthier Supplies guy in Portugal who I buy a lot of stuff, including wooden blocks from. Anyway, he sells this stuff, and it's different grades. I've just got some more on order, but this one's 220 and peels off, and you put your thing down on there, cut either sides, and you've got yourself the self-adhesive tape stuck to there. Don't need that anyway. So there we go. As I say, if you disagree with what I said, please don't get into a insults war. I'm more than happy for you to share views, but I'm not interested in arguing about things. This is just the way I do it, not the only way. Okay, hope you enjoyed that, hope it was useful, and I'll see you soon on another Reloved guitar. And it probably, next one I'm going to be putting up will be this little baby, which is Matthias's old Japanese strap body with the terrible, useless free flight tremolo system broken. It broke the inside, smashed the wood, so I've stripped it out, filled it with a block of oak, and I've hard-tailed this onto here, and it still works, which is great, just as a hardtail. Bought a new pick guard, got some, I think these are Vance and Alnico 5 pickups. Brian kindly donated a Squire CV neck, which is about halfway through its fret life, but it's going to be nice. All of it sits together nicely, and that, when I get some new electrics for that, that's going to be the next one on the bench, and I think it's going to be a really nice guitar. See you soon.